Yeah, so my name's Faye and I'm in my third year of medicine at Anglia Ruskin, and I applied as a gap year student. So I didn't apply in year 13 because I kind of knew that I wasn't going to get the grades that I needed. And then I took a gap year, tried to make everything better, tried to resit my exams and like improve my application. Ended up getting rejected, straight rejections off all the universities I applied to that year. And I was very, very, very lucky that Anglia Ruskin was the first new medical school to open. And they ended up opening so that applications were late. So I got like a final chance, and I ended up getting my place then after doing one gap year. Yeah, and now I'm in my third year.
Yeah, so I guess the first question begs, why medicine?
For me, so it was very late in the game for me. I was not one of someone who came out of the womb and their first words were like, "I want to be a doctor." My mum's a nurse, my nan is a nurse, so like caring and yeah, caring has always been something that I've like has been important to me, and doing something that impacts people has always been something that's important to me. And I've always enjoyed science, so it seemed like the logical option. It just came to me a bit later. I feel like to some extent I almost resisted medicine as an option because I feel like it's just almost pushed upon you. If you're more like, if you're one of the intelligent ones in your year, then it's almost like you should be a doctor. And I kind of resisted that for a very long time, and then it got to 16 and I was like, do you know what, this fits me so well. Why have I been resisting it so much? And then by the time I decided, God, I can't see myself doing anything other than medicine, it was like I wasn't doing as well as I needed to on my A levels. So yeah, so by the time I actually wanted it, it was just out of reach.
Yeah, so I guess starting from the beginning, from your story, if I remember correctly, you took a gap year and did some volunteering. So how do you feel that volunteering helped in your application?
So it obviously the way the applications work is it's in October, and I volunteered in from September to December. So I couldn't actually talk about it that much in my application. It did help in my interviews. I could talk about it a lot more. Um, but I did get to say, oh, I'm going to do this volunteering. But aside from that, the volunteering, along with I did like care work before I got to medical school, I found that when I was on wards and I was talking to patients, just having that practice talking to patients is so important, because I think you can think, oh, I'm a great communicator, but until you're forced to communicate with people who are 70, who are from a completely different background to you, who, like, there are so many different characters in the world. And I think when you're in your own little bubble, you think, oh, I'm a great communicator, I can talk to anyone. And until you're forced to actually talk to everyone, you don't actually learn how to communicate properly. So I think obviously I was in a different country, talking to people in English, I didn't have that much of like the local language, so that made it very difficult. We also came from very different backgrounds. That was another thing that made it very difficult. And by the end of it, you still find a way to communicate with people. So, and then the same with caring, I was caring for people who might have learning difficulties, or people who are very, very old and have like difficulty themselves communicating, and you have to find a way to like work around that. So I said that's one of the biggest things that I learned. And then obviously like hands-on clinical experience. I was really lucky. I was volunteering in like a mother and baby clinic, and seeing how like their clinical setting differs, like the clinical setting in a rural Zambian clinic differs from like a GP or a hospital here. That's also like very, very useful to see, and something that you can discuss at interview.
Yeah, and I guess you also had your job in your gap year that enabled you to grasp a lot of work experience in that as well, which must have helped within your application. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I always say when people are asking me about like what's a good job to have in a gap year, I kind of say maybe to steer away from like domestic caring, which is what I did, just because on top of like I had to do research and other stuff, and I did want to enjoy my gap year as well. It was a very, very, very difficult job. But I do think that like that experience in the long run has been very beneficial for me. But I think that maybe like say bank healthcare assistant would probably be, you'd get the same benefits, but it's a little bit more like it's still a hard job. But I say there aren't as many like drawbacks as domestic caring.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. So I guess within your application, you only sat the UCAT, if that's right. Yeah. So how did you
Yeah,
find?
yeah, just the UCAT.
So I think there's a bit of delay. So if I do overspeak you, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No, don't
Uh,
worry, don't worry.
yeah. So how did you find the UCAT? Is there any particular resources you found useful? Any revision that you particularly focused on?
So I actually, if I could go back and redo my UCAT, I would do it very, very, very differently. I think I did not get any support from the school. I don't think, like, not many people applied to medicine full stop. And I think a lot of the people who did had parents who were doctors, so they could kind of guide them in that respect. The way I prepared for my UCAT, and like I did all right, like I got above average. But you know, if you're going for a pretty good med school, then that's not always enough. But what I did to revise was just like this big book of practice questions, which just seems so like silly to me now when there are so many brilliant online resources that are like relatively for like probably the same price as what I spent on that bloody book. Um, and like it can give you so much more like insight into like the analytics of what you need to work on. And I also think as well the way I approached it, you know, it's not like sitting your GCSEs or your A levels. It's like skills based. It's not like fact recall. It's not something that you can just like learn and memorize. It's something that needs to be practiced like little and often for quite a long time, and that's something that I didn't do. And I think, you know, there are so many resources, so many courses that absolutely rinse you and are way so expensive. But there are so many online resources that are actually really affordable and yeah, and just are a lot better and more adaptive than like books. So probably not the best person to come to for UCAT advice.
No, I guess it's just gauging people's different experiences on what they found useful and what they've found, obviously, just rinse them of money. Again, you're not the first person to say that
Yeah,
revising for the
yeah,
UCAT, it's just, yeah, sorry, revising for the UCAT, you don't need to go out and spend £200-300 on a course.
yeah.
You can just have the books and that'll be sufficient. I guess to move on and talk about your interview stage of your application, how did you find, presume it was the new MMI style of interviews, how did you find them?
Yeah, so I actually really like the MMI style personally because I feel like it showcases people's skills a lot better. And me, obviously, just coming off the back of like volunteering and caring, like I had a lot of my soft skills were quite good. Like I was a good communicator. I was good at like understanding about like ethical dilemmas and things like that. So I think it worked well for me because at the same time I'm not very articulate, and I think when potentially when you come from like a different background and you're more well spoken, then you probably perform better in like the traditional style. So I actually really like the MMI, and I also love the way that if you do badly in one station, it doesn't affect you on the next one. I do think though, because when you're doing the practice questions, it can be hard because the practice questions that you practice, you will never get asked, but you will get asked something that is along the same lines. Like there's only a certain number of situations they can ask. They're just going to change it from like there's one that's like your friend goes away and her goldfish dies, like what do you do? Or like show us how you tell her that her goldfish died. Well, another one could be, you know, it's all about like letting someone down and then communicating effectively like what has happened and being honest about it, you know. And all they have to do is change and a couple things around. But I think when you read it off the sheet, it shocks you because it's different to something else where you kind of, where you expect you expect questions. Like if you go into a traditional interview, you know what to expect, whereas in MMI, it shocks you, and it's about in that moment taking a breather and going, right, what are they actually looking for? What practice question can I relate it to, and what did I do in that situation? So I think it's definitely trickier in some ways, but I think it actually is a far better gauge at how students will do in like a clinical setting and in medical school.
Yeah, I think I've touched on that with a few of the previous guests. They said it's not so much the content they are asking, like say for a goldfish or a dog has died. It's more the principle behind it on letting somebody down. Another example could be like taking somebody's history. It's not the actual history you're taking, but it's how you apply that knowledge and you apply yourself to that stressful situation. So in that respect, there's only a few scenarios that they can actually put you in. So I do totally agree with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I guess just to move on now. So looking back, is there anything you wish you would have known before you began your degree as a med student?
Like application wise or just like degree wise?
Um, just a bit of both. So from when you were applying to where you're at now.
Application wise, I would definitely think more about like the intricacies of different medical schools, because although it can seem like all the same, you know, every medical school wants a 2-1 in a science degree, or every medical school wants 3 A's, whatever. There are actually subtle differences in like the weighting they place on different areas, and I don't think I use that to my advantage, because there are, you know, I have strengths and I have weaknesses just like every candidate, and I don't think I thought about that enough in applying tactically, and especially because I was a weaker candidate. You know, if you're a strong candidate, you can apply to wherever takes your fancy and, you know, hope for the best. But when you're a weaker candidate, like those are the things you do have to think about. And at the end of the day, what was most important to me was getting into medical school, not and becoming a doctor, not where I went. So definitely consider the intricacies, the subtle differences. I'd also say make use of any, like if there are widening access criteria available to you, then make use of it. There are so many under advertised widening access programs in medical schools across the country. Like there was even Anglia Ruskin, like there was one criteria that I was like, oh my God, like I actually think I would have fallen into that and I didn't apply for it. And it would have taken a lot of stress off me. So I think just definitely look into widening access programs or what like support is available for you for the application. Then before I started medical school, I would definitely say understand that it's going to hit you like a ton of bricks and it's going to be very, very, very overwhelming, but just get your head down, work little and often, chip away, and it will be fine. As long as you know that you are doing enough. You got in there for a reason. I would also say like remember it's volume, not the content isn't necessarily that hard. It's the volume that you need to work through that is the difficult part. So don't spend hours and hours on one lecture. Just like get it done, and get as much done as possible. And I guess it can also be harder coming from like a degree where you go so much deeper into topics and then maybe go into medicine where you have to just kind of skim everything. And like I noticed that myself, but then I know a lot of my grad friends like did as well. And then, you know, I say this like on like all my videos, I sound like a broken record, but like getting your study technique down, because that is the way that you can make sure that you have life. Like the people that to do medicine, I think, especially on like my videos, you know, I'm not in the library all the time. I'm in the library a lot of the time, but the only reason I'm able to do that is because I have an efficient study technique. And sometimes people are like, how are you not like in the library all the time? And I'm like, because I've managed to like cut it down, but that's like a job in itself and something that needs to be learned. So yeah, I think that's everything.
Yeah, and I think you play a distinct role as well as other medical students in showing that medical school is not your life. And I think you're a prime example of the phrase "run your life around medicine," not let medicine run your life. And I think that's a distinction that needs to be made clear, especially as it's deemed such an intense and lengthy course. So I really do respect that in you.
You know, I think it's so, you say it's such a lengthy course, but at the end of the day, it's also a lengthy like life you've got to lead. You know, at the end, like we want doctors who are going to be in it for 40 years, and that's not going to
Yeah.
happen if they're like hating their job, hating their life, and they don't feel like they have anything else outside of medicine.
Yeah, I totally agree. I guess so. To get into the nitty gritty part now, is there any particular myths or misconceptions that you found since you started med school?
To do medicine, you have to be incredibly intelligent. I think that's a massive myth. I think as long as you're hardworking and you have good study techniques and you're relatively intelligent, you'll be absolutely fine. Um, it's definitely about like putting in like the hours and being efficient with your time. I guess you can't have a life outside of medicine. That's completely not true. We have a consultant who taught us in our ENT block, and he's in a rock band, and like he's a consultant surgeon. Do you know what I mean? I think I think part of it is that when to get into medicine, you have to fight so hard for your place. And I think some medical students have a tendency that when they get in, they like to tell everyone how hard they're working. And don't get me wrong, medicine is very hard, and it is really difficult. But it's almost like people want to prove that because they have worked so hard to get there in the first place. If that makes sense, they almost like they really push it on people, like medicine's be all and end all.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think in a positive way, you express the opposite of the non-professional characteristics that like the stereotypical med student or the stereotypical doctor. And as you said, it's not just yourself. I think it's becoming more and more common for people to express their lives outside of their profession in general.
Yeah, and I think it makes you more relatable as a doctor. I think, you know, as doctors, oh no, I'm not a doctor, but as a medical student, as a doctor, you have to find out so much about people's personal lives. I know that when I sit across from a doctor who is very stiff and like who doesn't come across as like a human to me, just comes across as like a very, I don't know, I can't like, it's so much nicer to go in and see a friendly face who you can relate to, and you're far more likely to share important pieces of information with them. And like, I feel like I would trust someone more if they were like that, but that's just me.
No, yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. Uh, so I guess to move on, just what keeps you motivated in such an intense course like medicine?
So I try, like, I remember someone saying something to me that's completely changed the way I see like motivation. And it was like, I can't remember who said it, or if I read it or whatever, but it's really stuck in my brain. And that is like, you can't rely on motivation. You have to rely on habits, because we all have up days and down days, and no one can be expected to be motivated every single morning when they wake up. And I think when I wake up and I go, oh, you know, I'm not really feeling it today, it's okay to recognize that. But then if you have good habits in place, then you still end up getting work done. So like I think it's again, this isn't, I mean, I think I've read this somewhere. Apparently it takes 21 days to start a habit. So if there's something you want to do, like I have in something, a new habit that I want to start is I want to do 100 past med questions a day. At the moment, I'm not doing that much, but what I'm trying to do is do 21 days of it. So then it sticks. And then no matter where I'm at with my motivation, I'll do it, if that makes sense, because it's just like part of my routine. But I have to say, on the days that I don't feel very motivated, very cringe, but I do actually really enjoy watching like medical TV, because I think I can just watch it and be like, oh, Faye, that's going to be you in 3 years' time. And that does sometimes get me off my arse.
No, yeah, I totally agree. I guess I've heard a few people explain it in slightly different ways, but the same way you've explained it is in it's instead of motivation as being a trait, it's those traits behind the motivation that all come together. So as you said, that being your habits that drive you forward.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I guess on the contrary to that is with such a long and strenuous course, how do you find time to plan for like rest and self care?
Oh, that's hard, because I think there's definitely periods when it's not as easy to practice self-care, especially during exams when everything's just a bit go, go, go. But I would definitely say, self-care, I think in our head, everyone's got different images of what self-care means to them. But I'm part of like my university cheer team, and in my head, that is self-care to me. And I think having something that is sociable, so like that means that you're accountable. I know that if I didn't turn up to cheer, my friends would be like, why aren't you here? And also is programmed in, so it's not like as flexible. Then I think that forces me, even if I've got an exam, even if I've got a deadline or I've got something that's keeping me busy, I'll still take that hour out or that hour and a half to go to cheer, because it's in there already. Whereas if I was like, oh, I need to take a break, because that's just me saying that, it's a lot easier for me to be flexible and me to end up working through or whatever. um but yeah, I would just say, and also have like self-care that's like really self-care, if that makes sense, because I think sometimes you don't like truly relax, or it's not like truly, when when you're sitting and you're watching telly or something, but you're still thinking about things that are maybe worrying you or stressing you out. Like, just when you're having a rest, completely rest, and like rest your mind, and don't think about the work, just think about just truly, truly resting yourself, because that'll be so much more beneficial when you do go back to your work.
Yeah, I guess it comes back to the fact of if you know you've done the work, then you can truly have that rest, and you almost deserve that rest. Obviously, if you're putting too much on yourself, then you're going to find that out in the long run. But as long as you're getting the work done, as you say, little and often, then you can honestly in yourself plan that time for
Yeah.
rest.
Yeah, little and often really is. That is the key. And that's the same with rest. Little and often work, and little and often rest as well.
Yeah, so I guess it begs the question of how do you feel your past experiences have helped in your time at medical school in terms of like the competitiveness, the nerves and pressure of applying, and whilst you're in there.
Oh, so I'd say number one is definitely because I didn't get my grades first time round. I think I went into medical school and I did not expect to be the most intelligent, so it wasn't a shock when I wasn't the most intelligent. Whereas I think for a lot of medical students who've come from being the most intelligent person in their year, then they get to medical school and suddenly they're with everyone else who is the most intelligent in their year, and it's it can be a self-confidence, especially when that has like defined them for so many years. Their intelligence has been like their main trait that everyone knows them for, and then suddenly it doesn't really mean anything in medical school. That can be really, really, really hard people's self-esteem. And I think because I'd already had that knock, it was not like, it was all right for me, really. I also think I've always had like hobbies, and I've always had other things outside of school. So when I got to medical school as well, I carried on with that. And I remember I used to do dance, and like I said to my mum when my GCSEs were coming up, I was like, oh, I think I should quit dance. And my mum was like, what? It's an hour every couple of days in the evening. You would need to have that break anyway. Why don't you just keep doing it? And then that's your break. You go, you see your friends, and then you come home and you've had exercise. You're probably a little bit tired, so you'll sleep better. It's far more productive than like just sitting in front of the telly. So I've always had to be quite balanced with like my working and like being rested. So I think that was really helpful. I also think not getting my grades level has made me value, and getting rejected has made me value my place a lot more. So, you know, a lot of medical students, they get to medical school and then they get a little bit comfortable. And, you know, the thing is with medicine is you can be the most intelligent person in the world. It doesn't matter if you don't do the work, because there's just too much. It's not like, say, in GCSEs, you could get quite a good grade without doing too much revision. In A-levels, it was a lot harder, but, you know, there's still those geniuses who didn't have to work that hard and they still did quite well. In medicine, you can't get away with that. And some people haven't had that knock, and then they get to medical school. And then obviously, like, my gap year was so beneficial for communication skills. I think when I went on the ward, I noticed it straight away. Like, I did feel really comfortable talking to people and comfortable in like a work environment, I guess.
No, yeah, I totally agree. In terms of Anglia Ruskin just as a university, how do you feel the competitiveness of the courses? Like, has it benefited you, or like the competitiveness between each student? Do you feel like it's still there? If that makes sense.
So it's interesting actually, because everyone in my cohort, or the vast majority of people in my cohort, were all people who got rejected, and like Anglia Ruskin was their last option. Okay. So you'd think that would make people less competitive, because they like, you'd think that, but it was still quite a big issue. I remember the first like talk we had from the head of our medical school, and he spoke to us about deciles. So like, if you didn't know, like, deciles is you don't get like a first, a second, or a third. You get ranked in, the whole year is split into 10, and you get put in a group of 10, like from the best to the worst. And he told us about it, and he made it out to be the be all and end all. And from that talk onwards, people were very competitive. And I think in first year it was a lot worse than what it is now. I think people wouldn't like share their resources or lie about how long they're in the library for, or different, you know, little things that you'd notice and you'd think, God, that's not helpful to anyone. But then now I think as we've all grown a lot older, and like we all realise we've seen the bigger picture, and that, you know, if we help each other, we'll all end up doing better. And the most important thing is that we doctors, not what bloody decile we got. But yeah, I think it's a lot better now. But in first year, it was a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like the common goal is there once you've gotten a place, and once you're in the degree, the common goal is there for everybody to graduate successfully. However, as you probably well know, everybody's competing for that one place. Everybody's scratching to secure that place. So I do understand the competitiveness behind it. However, do you feel as though as the years progress on, it becomes more teamwork orientated rather than individual study?
I think what people realise is that actually we'll get a lot further if we help each other. You know, like, if I find a good resource and I tell someone, then hopefully, I mean, in first year, so prime example, in first year, I remember I made all these flashcards and I would just give it out willy-nilly, like the link, and I'd be like, oh, use them, yeah, it doesn't matter. And then I found out that this person had been like making their own flashcards, but they've been keeping them on private. And I was just a bit like, why would you do that? Whereas now, I think now we've come to the realization that if you share a resource with someone, then chances are in a couple of weeks' time, they'll come to you and be like, oh, like I found this really good resource as well. And I send you a link for maybe a good website or whatever. Or when you're revising, you can ask them a question, they can ask you a question. And actually it's mutually beneficial for everyone to work together. And it actually doesn't benefit you being very like territorial about, and I think competitiveness is good to an extent, but I think it is more important that everyone passes. And I think when you get to this stage and things are starting to get a lot harder, for the majority of people, their main goal is to pass.
Yeah.
And I think that it's easier to do that when you're all together helping each other.
Yeah, totally agree. So I guess just to touch a bit more on what the degree is actually like, have you found it starts off a lot more preclinical and then it progresses on to more like hands-on experience, or have you found like it's just split?
So for Anglia Ruskin, it's actually really interesting because, it's completely gone topsy-turvy for me because of Corona, but we have placement right from the November of first year, and even our lectures from 7 weeks in, we were taught like the clinical relevance of everything that we were learning. So I actually found that very motivating, to be honest, because you weren't just learning a random process you weren't just learning a random process, you understood why it was important for you to know that process in terms of like how you would practice in the future. And we had placement from really early on. So we'd learn about pneumonia, we'd see a patient with pneumonia. We'd learn about heart failure, we'd see a patient with heart failure. It reinforced everything we were learning in our brains. So first year was great. We had lots of placement on first year. And then obviously Corona happened in second year. So I didn't have very much placement at all last year. And then this year I haven't had placement at all this year because I go on placement full time from March. So it's been very topsy-turvy for me. I had a very placement heavy first year and none basically since then. But I would the way it's meant to work is you're meant to have lots of placement throughout. And I guess it just depends on who you are as a person. I think that suits my way of learning because I learn something in a lecture. I then see the structures in anatomy. We then learn how to examine them in clinical skills, and then we see them on placement. So everything is being constantly repeated, which I actually think is very good for you to get it in, because the first time you might not understand it. The second time you understand it a little bit. The third time it's just starting to click. And then you see a patient, and number one, you'll remember the patient because it's a lot easier to remember a person than it is to remember a book. But also then it actually clicks. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess with Anglia Ruskin and the other med schools that have opened, well, the other new med schools that have opened across the country, how do you find obviously that there is a bit of a worry of you're going to commit the next 5 years of your life to this university. So how do you feel like Anglia Ruskin as a general university has handled the med course? Do you feel like it's progressed well along the years?
So our curriculum is based off Dundee's, which I think is a really good safety net because, it's tried and tested, whereas I know a couple others, I think Edge Hill have made their own, and I'm not sure about the others. But that's nice because we know that curriculum works. I think there's definitely been teething issues, but they have been quite receptive to our feedback. And then I remember I spoke to one of my friends, I can't remember what exactly the issue was, but I was talking about something and she goes to Queen Mary's. And she was we have the same issue. So I think there are lots of issues that are actually quite common across medical schools. And in actual fact, I think that they've almost been more receptive because it's the first few years. So they're more the course is more malleable. instead of maybe like a more traditional course that is more rigid. I think it's hard because when we went on to clinical placement, some clinicians sometimes see it as like a little bit of a Mickey Mouse like medicine course, when we're all going to be GMC registered, we're all held to the same standard, but just dealing with that prejudice can be quite difficult, and dealing with the, oh, you're a new medical school kind of whatever, it can be just a little bit annoying. But at the end of the day, a doctor's a doctor, you know. As long as we work hard and prove everyone wrong and create our own reputation, then that should be fine.
Yeah, I guess that's the uniqueness of the degree, is that you all get registered under the same umbrella, no matter if you went to Oxford, Cambridge, or you're at the new one, say like UCLan or Anglia Ruskin. So in that sense, yeah, I do totally agree that there is going to be some prejudice, but it's at the end of the day, you're all going to have the same title, so it shouldn't really matter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I guess what's the vision going into the future then? Where you're in your third year now, so where do you see yourself progressing once you've graduated?
So my favourite block so far has easily been like our reproductive and like sexual health blocks. So I am leaning towards obs and gynae potentially, um, but we'll see. I think another thing that like I wish more people knew before they started medical school is just be open to everything, because you actually don't know what's going to take your fancy. And I think even though I'm swaying towards obs and gynae and kind of thinking about like doing things that will better an application for obs and gynae, I'm still open to anything that like suits me better or I'm more interested in.
Yeah, I guess that's a perfect answer of having people on before they've almost committed to one thing, but then later on down their career, like 3 4 years down their career, the F1 and F2 have changed their minds. So I guess that is the perfect mindset to go into.
Yeah, definitely. You shouldn't close yourself off to anything. You never know like what opportunity is going to come your way.
Yeah, totally agree. So I guess for future medical students watching this, are there any golden pieces of advice you give them just going through the application process?
Oh, so the application process. Just that I would say um, practice the UCAT as early as possible, and just do little and often from as early as possible. Because it's skills based, so it takes time to build up those skills. It's not going to happen overnight. Like, you know, you could potentially cram for an exam, you can't cram for the UCAT. I would also say utilize any help that is available to you. Utilize free resources as much as possible. Don't waste thousands and thousands of pounds on courses. Apply tactically if you maybe have some weaknesses, and also know the course structures, because although apply tactically, but also if you know that you want to go to a traditional uni, then make sure you're applying to a traditional uni. I knew that I wanted an integrated course. Knew that I would not be able to motivate myself through like all the hard times and all the scientific heavy stuff if I wasn't seeing patients and I didn't have that like reminder about what I'm aiming towards there on a regular basis. So yeah, just know what it means when people say integrated, PBL, traditional. It can all get a little bit confusing, but yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I guess finally for people starting their first day out, Anglia Ruskin, what would be your take-home tips?
For first day at Anglia Ruskin,
Yeah, yeah, sorry.
like medicine.
Yeah, yeah, sorry, medicine, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, first day angry rescuing, be really friendly, make lots of friends because your friends are going to be the ones who get you through all the tough times. Learn how to revise the material properly. Don't get too overwhelmed by it all. You will eventually get into the routine. And I don't know, give yourself a big pat on the back for getting in.
Yeah, that's perfect. So I guess you've answered all my questions. Thank you again for taking the time of your evening to come speak to me. I really commend the fact that you're so open with showing people what your medical school experience is like and what you've actually made of it. You've shown people that, again, going back to the quote of run your life around medicine, not let medicine run your life. So
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
thank you. So is there any way our viewers can find you online or get in contact with you that you'd like to plug?
Yeah, so I'm really bad with my Instagram DMs. So I guess you could try DMing me, but probably the best way to like get in contact with me is probably by commenting on my YouTube. And then if you say on my YouTube I've sent you a DM, then I'll be able to like find the DM. But my YouTube is just Faye Bate, like FAYEBATE, and my Instagram's the same, just at Faye Bate.
I'll be sure to add it in the description so they can click on it. But again, thank you, Faith, for taking the time, and I hope you have the rest of your evening. I'm sure it's very late there, so. All right, thank you, and
Thank you so much for having me.
all right, take care.